The first time Elliot Voss changed the past, he did not know that something on the other side of everything noticed. It was a small thing, trivial even. He had been standing at the kitchen counter on a Tuesday morning in November, pouring coffee into a mug that had belonged to his mother, when his hand slipped. The mug, white ceramic with a faded painting of a lighthouse on its side, fell and shattered on the tile floor. He stood there looking at the pieces for a long moment, something cold and unreasonable moving through his chest. The mug was just a mug. He knew that, but it had sat on his mother's counter for 22 years, and she had been in the ground for 3, and there were fewer and fewer things left that still smelled faintly of her kitchen. He closed his eyes. He wasn't sure, afterward, exactly what he had done. It felt less like a decision and more like a very specific kind of wanting. A wanting so precise and concentrated that it became something structural, something that reached backward through the minutes, like a hand reaching into still water. When he opened his eyes, the mug was whole. The coffee was still in the pot. He was standing 2 feet from the counter, not 1, and his hand had not yet reached for the mug. Elliot stood very still. Then he walked to the counter, picked up the mug carefully with both hands, and poured his coffee. He didn't tell anyone. There was no one to tell, really. He lived alone in a 3rd-floor apartment in a city that had never quite felt like his, working a job in data management that he performed competently and without passion. His social world was small and mostly digital. A few friends from university who texted occasionally. A co-worker named Priya who sometimes invited him to things he usually declined. He was, by most measures, a man who had learned to occupy as little space as possible. He tested it again that evening. He knocked a glass of water off his desk deliberately, watched it fall, watched it spread across the floorboards. And then he reached backward, that same strange, focused wanting. And the glass was upright and the floor was dry and his hand was still near the rim. The 3rd time, he reached back further. 20 minutes. He had sent an email to his team lead containing a mistake, a mislabeled dataset that would cause a cascade of problems downstream. He sat at his desk, felt the familiar sick drop of realizing the error, and then he unmade it. He reached back through 20 minutes of elapsed time and found the moment just before he'd hit send, and he held it there, and he corrected the label, and he sent it right. When he came back to the present, the email in his sent folder was correct. No one would ever know. It was on that 3rd occasion that he first noticed the smell. It was faint. So faint, he initially dismissed it as something from the building's ventilation system. Like salt and burned hair and something else underneath. Something he had no name for. Something that made him think involuntarily of deep ocean trenches and the organisms that lived in absolute darkness at the bottom of them. It was there for perhaps 10 seconds, and then it was gone, and he opened a window and forgot about it. Over the weeks that followed, Elliot refined the ability the way he refined everything, methodically, quietly, with a data manager's attention to pattern. He discovered that he could reach back as far as 4 hours with relative ease, and further than that with concentration and cost. The cost being a headache that ranged from mild to incapacitating depending on the distance. He could not change anything involving other people directly. He could not reach into someone else's past and alter their actions. He could only change what he himself had done, said, or failed to do, his own thread in the weave, nothing else. He used it modestly. A forgotten bill paid before the late fee. A call to his sister on her birthday that he had missed. A stumble on the stairs that would have cracked 2 ribs. He told himself it was harmless. He told himself he was only correcting mistakes, small administrative errors in the ledger of a life. He told himself this with the particular conviction of someone who suspects they are wrong. The smell came back each time. Stronger. By December, it was not merely a smell, but a presence. Something atmospheric. a thickening of the air in whatever room he was in just after he made a correction. He would sit at his desk or stand in his kitchen, and the room would feel, briefly, like a room that had been watched for a very long time. The shadows in the corners seemed to pool rather than merely gather. The silence had a texture to it, something fibrous and attentive. Once, after reaching back 3 hours to retrieve a conversation with his sister that had gone badly, he had said something dismissive, something he immediately regretted, and he went back and did not say it. He looked up from his desk and was almost certain that the shadow beneath his bookshelf was breathing. He turned on every light in the apartment. The shadow was just a shadow, but his hands did not stop shaking until morning. He found the word in a book he had not intended to buy. He'd been in a second-hand shop in early January, killing time between a cancelled appointment and the cold outside, flipping through a disorganized shelf of philosophy texts and outdated travel guides, when a slim volume with no title on its spine fell from the shelf and landed open at his feet. He picked it up. The page it had opened to was dense with small type, and the header at the top read, "On the entities that maintain the integrity of the causal record." He bought the book. He read it in one sitting. It was written by someone who identified themselves only as a former archivist, and it was either a work of genuine occult scholarship or an extraordinarily detailed fiction, and Elliot found, with some disquiet, that he was not entirely sure which. The Archivist wrote about time not as a river, the common metaphor, but as a document, a living record, authored continuously, every moment a word added to a text that extended backward to the beginning of things and forward to their end. The record was, the Archivist argued, not passive. It was maintained. There exist, the Archivist wrote, certain presences that are neither alive nor dead in any sense our language can accommodate. They predate the vocabulary of existence. They are not evil, precisely, because evil implies a moral framework they are entirely exterior to. They simply are. And what they are is the enforcement of the record's integrity. When a correction is made, when a word is changed or a line erased, they feel it the way a wound feels in a nerve, and they turn their attention toward the source. Do not mistake their attention for interest. They do not wonder about you. They do not hate you. They do not see you the way you see another person. What they see, if see is even the right word, is the place in the record where something has been altered. You are the alteration, and they come to examine it. The examination is not pleasant. The longer it continues, the less of you remains. Elliot closed the book and sat in silence for a very long time. He looked at the corner of the room. The corner was dark. The darkness was entirely ordinary. He watched it for 5 minutes, and nothing moved, and he told himself he was being absurd, that he had read a book of fiction and frightened himself, that there was nothing in his corner and nothing in his apartment, and nothing following the thread of his small, quiet corrections through the fabric of time. That night, he dreamed of a vast and lightless interior, like the inside of something that had never had an outside. There was a sound in the dream. Not quite a sound, more the idea of one, a vibration in the architecture of the place. And it was oriented toward him with a focus that made him feel simultaneously microscopic and utterly exposed. Like a word that had been misspelled and a proofreader had found it. He woke at 3 a.m. with the salt and burned hair smell so strong he gagged. He tried to stop. He was sincere about it. For 19 days in January, he made no corrections. He let mistakes stand. He sent the wrong file and did not unsend it. He missed a step on the stairs and caught the railing and stood there breathing, his ankle throbbing, refusing to reach back. He had a terrible phone call with his sister in which he said the dismissive thing again, and he sat with the guilt of it. And he did not fix it. The smell faded. The shadows resumed their normal behavior. The dreams grew quiet. On the 20th day, a child ran into the street in front of his car. He was driving back from the grocery store on a grey afternoon, going 30 kilometers per hour on a residential street, and the boy, no older than 6, wearing a red coat, chasing something, not looking, ran from between 2 parked cars directly into his path. Elliot's foot found the brake, but the distance was wrong, the physics were wrong, and he knew in the elongated crystalline moment of impact that he was not going to stop in time. He reached back. 4 seconds. He only needed 4 seconds. He found the moment before the boy entered the street, and he held the present there, suspended, and in those 4 seconds he laid on the horn, and the boy stopped, startled, and looked up, and the car came to a full stop 2 meters away. The boy stared at him through the windshield, then turned and ran back to the sidewalk, where a frantic woman, his mother presumably, grabbed him and held him. Elliot sat in the stopped car, breathing. The smell arrived like a wave. This time it was not subtle. It filled the car, salt and burned hair and that unnamed third thing, and beneath it something new. A sound, or the impression of one, a low resonance that he felt in his back teeth and the base of his skull. He gripped the steering wheel and looked into the rearview mirror because he could not help it, because every animal instinct he had was screaming that something was behind him. The back seat was empty. The mirror showed an empty back seat and the street behind the car and grey January sky. But in the mirror, the street behind him was wrong. Not dramatically wrong, not grotesquely, visually wrong. It was subtler than that. The perspective was slightly off. The vanishing point was not where it should have been. The parked cars on either side receded at an angle that did not correspond to any actual geometry, as though the street behind his car led somewhere that was not continuous with the street in front of it. And at the far end of where the street should have been, at the place where the vanishing point was wrong, something was standing. He could not have described it then or afterward with any precision. He could say, large. He could say, still in a way that living things are not still, because living things are never entirely without motion, breath, heartbeat, the small unconscious shifts of weight. This was still the way mountains are still, or the way a word on a page is still. It had the quality of something that simply was, without process or effort. It was looking at him. He drove home and did not look in the rearview mirror once. The apartment was different when he got back. He noticed it the way you notice that a painting on the wall has been moved. Not obviously wrong, but carrying the residue of wrongness, the invisible bruise of something having been touched. The furniture was in its correct positions. The lights were as he had left them. His books were on their shelves, and his dishes were in the drying rack, and the mug, his mother's mug, was in the cupboard where he kept it. But the apartment felt observed. He sat on the couch and opened the Archivist's book again and read the passages he had already marked. Those who persist in their corrections, the Archivist wrote, do not vanish all at once. That is not how the examination works. What happens is subtler and, in its way, more complete. The entity does not remove the corrector from the record. It begins, instead, to audit them. Every moment of their life is reviewed against what should have been. Every deviation is noted. And as the audit progresses, and it is a slow thing, deliberate, vast, the corrector finds that the world around them grows increasingly uncertain. Not false exactly, but uncertain. As though the record of their presence in it has grown smudged. People begin to misremember them. Not forget. That is too clean a word. Misremember. Conversations they had are recalled differently by the other party. Photographs shift slightly, their face a little less distinct than it should be, as though the image were taken slightly out of focus. They find themselves in places they do not remember going. They find that they cannot entirely trust the continuity of their own days. In the final stages, the Archivist notes, the corrector begins to suspect that they themselves are a correction, that some original version of their life exists, and that what they are living now is a deviation from it. an error that the entity is slowly, methodically erasing. Elliot put the book down. He thought about the boy in the red coat, alive because of 4 seconds that should not have been altered. He thought about the street in the mirror with its wrong vanishing point. He thought about his mother's mug, hole in the cupboard, which should by all rights be in pieces on the tile floor of a memory he no longer had. He picked up his phone and called his sister. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Elliot, this is a surprise. I know. I wanted to hear your voice." A pause. "Are you okay?" "I think so." He looked at the corner of the room. "Do you remember, when we were kids, the lighthouse mug? The one Mum always used?" "Of course. The one with the faded lighthouse. She got it on that trip to… where was it? I can never remember." "Me neither." He paused. "Do you know where it ended up? I think it broke. When we were clearing out the house, it fell off the counter. You were there. You looked absolutely gutted." A small, gentle laugh. "You're thinking about her?" "Yes," he said. "I'm thinking about her." After he hung up, he sat in the quiet apartment for a long time. Then he went to the cupboard and took out the mug and held it in both hands. Whole, intact. Its lighthouse faded to a ghost on the white ceramic. It should not be here. He knew that now with perfect clarity. The record said it had broken. The record was correct, and he had reached in and altered it, and something that existed outside the vocabulary of existence had noticed, and had turned its vast and indifferent attention toward the place where a word had been changed. He could feel it, now that he was paying attention, the quality of being observed, not hostile. Hostility would have been almost comforting, almost human, just attentive, thoroughgoing, the way an auditor moves through files, dispassionate, total. He set the mug on the counter. He did not put it back in the cupboard. He has not made a correction in 4 months. The smell comes sometimes, faint, brief, like a remnant. On those mornings, he opens every window, regardless of the weather, and makes coffee, and sits at the counter and does not think too carefully about what might still be in the process of reviewing him. He has found that is the only workable approach. Don't look for it. Looking for it makes it more present. His sister visited last weekend. She walked through his apartment commenting on this and that, and when she saw the mug on the counter, she went quiet for a moment. "I thought that broke," she said. "I thought so too," Elliot said. "But I found it." She picked it up and turned it in her hands. "That's strange. I'm sure I saw it in pieces." "Memory is funny," he said. She looked at him for a moment, with an expression he could not read. Then she set the mug back down and moved on. He has been thinking about whether to get rid of it, whether having it here is a kind of ongoing alteration, a word still changed, a scar in the record that has not fully closed, whether removing it would help. He doesn't know. The Archivist's book does not cover the aftermath in much detail. What he knows is this. On the nights when the apartment feels observed, when the silence has that fibrous texture and the shadows seem to consider pooling, he sits very still and he makes no corrections, and he waits. And eventually the quality of the room returns to something like ordinary. The attention seems to lessen, not to leave entirely, not to vanish, but to thin, the way fog thins toward morning without ever becoming entirely not fog. He thinks about the boy in the red coat sometimes. He thinks about whether there is a version of the record in which that boy did not stop, in which Elliot Voss is a man who struck a child with his car on a grey January afternoon and must carry that. He thinks about whether that version is the correct one, the word that was supposed to be there before he reached in and changed it. He thinks he will never know. He thinks not knowing is the condition he has earned. The mug is on the counter. It is whole. His mother will have used it thousands of times in the life she lived, and it was supposed to end in pieces on a kitchen floor. And it didn't, because he couldn't let it. That is the original sin of it, if sin is the right word. Not malice, not arrogance, just the unbearable smallness of grief and the catastrophic precision of a wanting. Somewhere, he believes this now, the way he believes in weather and gravity. Something is still reading through the file of his life, cross-referencing each moment against what the record intended. It is not finished. It may not finish for a long time, but it is not in his corner right now, and the smell is not in his kitchen, and the coffee is hot, and the lighthouse on the mug is faded but legible. He holds it with both hands. He does not reach back. He lets the morning be exactly what it is.